A guy in a tree told Genevieve she was going to die. The first cold breaths of autumn were blowing over the lake and into the park where she liked to people watch. There had been ample viewing earlier in the afternoon, the trails congested with babbling children and selfie-taking couples. She even got to witness one mother who had all 3 of her kids on leashes and would offer unsolicited explanations to passersby, saying, "I don't want them to drown in the lake," even though the lake was gated off. But evening brought a gray chill, and the crowd quickly thinned out. Genevieve had zipped up her coat and rounded a curve into the woods. She walked for a while, hypnotized by the quiet. When she heard the voice, she jumped, realizing she had lost track of time and where she was going. "Excuse me," it called. At first, Genevieve couldn't tell where it came from. She twirled in a circle and looked around, but there was nobody else on the trail. "Hello," it tried again. She couldn't tell if the voice was male or female. "Hi." She followed the sound up a tree about 10 feet to her right and saw a blonde-haired man waving at her up in the branches. He was extremely handsome, broad-shouldered and muscular, hair cropped short, perfect teeth. Something about him was off, though. Unnatural. His eyes were the deepest blue Genevieve had ever seen, bright and electric like neon. And his skin was so pale that it literally glowed. Weirdest of all was his suit. It reminded her of a diver's suit. Skin tight, rippled texture, black like an abyss. There was absolutely no reflection or gloss to it. It covered the guy completely from the neck down. He held a few leaves in his gloved hand, all red or orange. Most of the leaves in the park hadn't begun to change yet, so it seemed he was collecting the few that had. Genevieve said, recoiling from eye contact. His eyes had gravity. She felt a powerful urge to trust him, but she didn't trust this urge. It made her think of the way poisonous flowers or Venus flytraps make themselves pretty and enticing to pull their prey in. The stranger laughed, and his laugh was so song-like and enchanting that Genevieve laughed too before she could stop herself. "Yes," he agreed. His voice was the most unsettling thing about him. It was beautiful, androgynous and relaxing, but it had an odd tinny quality, like she was hearing it through a speaker. "Why don't you come up here and join me?" he said. Genevieve laughed again, out of pure bafflement. "I'm sorry, what?" "Come on up," he repeated. "I want to talk to you." He smiled, which made it even harder not to like him. That smile could move markets, Genevieve thought. "Buddy," Genevieve said, "if I try to climb that tree, I will break my ass." "Fair enough," the guy shrugged, still smiling. "Could you come closer at least, so we can talk?" "You're talking now," Genevieve said. "If you want to talk so much, why don't you climb down? What are you even doing up there?" "I can't do that," he said. He didn't smile. "Why not?" "Someone will see." Genevieve looked around. There was no one in sight, in any direction. "Come stand by the trunk," the guy said. "Or wait a minute and take a ride with me. I'm leaving soon." Genevieve knew then that she should walk away, but she didn't. She was suspiciously unafraid. "If you think I'm gonna take a ride with a random guy in a tree, you must be smoking some wonky shit." The guy nodded. Genevieve added, "Just come down," though she didn't know why. "No," he said. He was firm, but not unkind. Genevieve shook her head. She tried to zip her coat up, but it was already totally closed. "Well," she said, twirling the zipper in her fingers, "what do you want to talk about?" "I wanted to let you know that you're going to die soon." He said it the way a receptionist would confirm a dentist appointment. Genevieve blinked. There wasn't a single thought in her head. She looked for one, and when no appropriate reaction presented itself, she just said, "What?" "You're going to die," he said again. "Soon." Genevieve chuckled awkwardly.
Who the hell are you anyway? What's your deal?
You can call me Erasmus, the guy replied, looking down at his leaves and thumbing through them like a deck of cards. I have no deal. I'm just here to tell you.
But who are you?
He looked up. Erasmus, he said, as if that explained anything.
But what do you do? You just hang out at parks and climb trees and tell people they're gonna die? That can't pay very well.
Not people, you. I'm here to talk to you, Genevieve. She caught her breath, finally hit with a dose of the dread that she felt was appropriate to the situation.
How do you know my name?
She asked, almost whispering. Erasmus shrugged. It's my business.
No,
Genevieve barked.
No, it sure isn't. Who the fuck are you? What is this?
It's all right, Erasmus said casually. Again, Genevieve had no reaction. She wanted to be angrier. She wanted to be frightened, and she was, but not like she should be. Her instinct, even now, was to believe him. Why? She had less trust for her doctor than this wacko in a tree, and that scared her more than Erasmus himself or anything he'd said. She noticed that he'd been sitting there, unmoving, watching her work all this out with the patience of a kindergarten teacher. She dug for a sense of anger about this and came out with a "fuck off," then spun and walked back the way she'd come. It's all right, Erasmus called to her back.
I'll see you soon, Genevieve.
She walked faster. A gust of bitter wind blew a few autumn-colored leaves over the path. Genevieve kept her office door at a crack. The blinds on the window of the door were closed, but she had a sign taped to the outside that said, "Come on in, just staying warm," with a reassuring smiley face. A little after 9 in the morning, Candy knocked and came in. She shut the door behind her and sat in a chair across from Genevieve's desk.
Is this a work-related matter?
Genevieve asked. Candy didn't answer. Her dark brow furrowed and she fidgeted with her hands. Middle age showed in the creases of her eyes and in the streaks of gray hair that she left uncolored, but she was an attractive woman. Genevieve thought they looked exactly the same age, which annoyed her since Candy was 15 years older. Every time she came into her office, which was daily, Genevieve got self-conscious and glanced at herself in her blackened computer monitors. Blonde and blue-eyed, next to Candy's brunette and brown. Genevieve's hair was thicker, with a slight wave, and she kept it down over her shoulders, whereas Candy usually tied hers up. Candy wore more makeup. Genevieve didn't bother with it anymore, and that left her own premature pre-wrinkles exposed. But if she wanted, she could be more attractive than Candy. If she tried. She didn't want to try, though, and she hated that, because she wanted to want to try. She knew all this was petty and berated herself for thinking about any of it. It was wrong to turn a good friendship into a beauty contest, but she enjoyed the comparisons, and even enjoyed the hostility that they built up in her thoughts and in her blood, even though she never acted on any of it, because she knew these feelings were wrong. She hated that she had them and liked them despite knowing they were wrong. She spun in her chair suddenly, realizing she'd been dwelling on all this for a solid minute, and Candy still hadn't said a word. Hello? Candy blinked and looked up from the blue carpet she'd been staring at.
What? I said, is this a work-related matter?
Candy looked away.
Yeah, kinda.
Genevieve snapped her fingers in Candy's face.
Are you stoned? What is wrong with you?
Candy made a smile.
Yes. I mean, yes, it's work-related, not yes, I'm stoned.
Genevieve stared at her.
Girl, I'm becoming concerned. Don't forget I do work for HR.
She laughed. Candy didn't laugh.
That's why I'm in here, she said. You're HR. That means I can vent.
Yes, Genevieve said.
You can vent to me because I'm HR, not because we've slept in the same bed. Or not vent so much. Get things off my chest or what have you. Yes! You can talk and get things off your chest. Or you can sit there like a weirdo and suspense me to death. Again with the bed thing, Candy said. Stop making that sound suggestive. The hotel had one queen bed and we didn't know until we got there. God damn it, Miss Delayed Reaction. Will you tell me what's going on with you, please? I'm getting ready to have you drug tested.
Candy didn't return Genevieve's levity. She sighed and gazed around the room for a minute, as if she'd never seen the walls before. Genevieve watched her. She did have pretty eyes, very full and bright, but Genevieve was thinner. She hadn't yet developed that saggy skin thing that was beginning to happen under Candy's upper arms.
Something weird happened,
Candy finally said. Genevieve's heart jumped. Her knee-jerk reaction was to think Candy had met Erasmus too, but she knew that was ridiculous and was trying not to think about him anyway. So she ignored that thought.
Something weird is happening right now,
Genevieve said. Candy finally broke a little and chuckled. She picked up a paperclip and threw it at Genevieve. It caught in her hair.
Suck a fuck,
Candy said. Genevieve fished the paperclip out and threw it back. Candy batted it away and it tinkled into the corner.
If you don't tell me what's going on in 5 seconds, I am going to recommend to your manager that you be drug tested, Candace Marie. Nibbles drowned,
Candy finally said. Nibbles was her pet rabbit. Genevieve lolled into the back of her chair.
Drowned? In our pool. What? When? Yesterday?
Candy nodded.
Mike found him last night.
Mike was her husband.
In your pool? Yes, Jeannie, in our pool.
Genevieve sat with her mouth open.
But isn't your pool closed by now? I could see my breath last night.
Candy's brow furrowed again and her fingers danced.
That's why it's so weird. We don't know how he could have gotten under the cover. I mean, it's weird enough to get out of his cage, but it happens. Animals get out of cages sometimes. Maybe one of us forgot to lock it, but you can't lift that cover and get under it. And I'm pretty positive we didn't forget to lock his cage. Well, weren't you watching him?
Genevieve flared.
How could he have gotten past you?
Candy started to laugh, then stopped.
Are you joking? Are you? I just don't understand how this could have happened. You should have seen him. I don't understand either,
Candy said slowly.
That's why I'm in here talking to you. I almost detect a finger point in your tone. That would be weird. Well, it just seems impossible to me.
Genevieve shot up from her chair.
He drowned? He couldn't have just waltzed off and drowned. Not if anyone was paying attention.
Candy crossed her arms.
Are you kidding? I'm not kidding! It's not a joke!
Genevieve yelled.
How could you let that happen? You should have been watching! You should have been watching him!
Candy's face changed suddenly. It had been starting to boil, but then all her anger drained away. She looked at Genevieve with pity now, with an unspoken knowing. Genevieve saw this and cut herself off. She could have extended her tirade for several minutes. She wanted to. But Candy's look, her recognition, reminded her that it would have been unreasonable. She was still furious, but she tried to make it look like she wasn't. Candy didn't seem convinced. She stood up from her chair and turned and opened the door. She glanced back at Genevieve and left her office and said nothing. Genevieve's post-work commute took her past the lake. It was getting so the first cozy hints of dusk sparkled orange over the water on her way home. She wanted to admire it, but thoughts of Erasmus kept butting into her mind. She stopped at a red light. If she turned right, it would take her into a ritzy town that she couldn't pronounce the name of and couldn't afford to live in. But this particular street was lined with old-time shops and restaurants that were, she admitted to herself, pretty cute. even if the people who shopped at them liked the smell of their own asses. Those sidewalks made for solid people watching, and Genevieve occasionally made her rounds there after one of her lakeside sessions. To her left, there was no street. There was only the lake. Just a few feet from the road was a fence overlooking the water. From there, the trails wound east, and the park widened into its own preserve of greenery. As much as Genevieve wanted to see how pretty the town looked this time of day, her attention was focused on the walkways and their slithering paths through the grass and shrubs and trees. Turning to look, she could see a few people dotting the park, small with distance, and wondered if one of them was him. Erasmus. Why was she even still thinking about him? He was just a weirdo at a park. There was nothing new about that. Parks were where weirdos gathered. That was the appeal of going there, to observe. But this weirdo wasn't entertaining. He was haunting her. A huge black pickup truck roared down the street at Genevieve's right. His light was yellow. It turned red several seconds before he reached it, but he swerved through so aggressively that his tires squealed. Genevieve's light turned green and he was still in the intersection. His muffler belched a black cloud, and he tore off as it dissipated over Genevieve's windshield.
Fucking asshat!
She yelled. In a dream that night, Genevieve was caught in a wildfire. The entire woods around the lake was consumed. She was surrounded. The smell of charred wood assaulted her senses. Smoke brought a stream of tears that she constantly blinked away. Every tree in the entire park was engulfed in flame, except for one. She was kneeling in front of it, as if she'd been offering it prayers. Erasmus was sitting in the branches of this lone tree, smiling down at her. She heard his voice, but his lips didn't move. "Don't be afraid," he kept saying. A ways down the footpath there was a small child, a toddler. She couldn't see his face through the smoke, but she knew who he was. She fought with her legs, but there was no feeling in them. They were glued to the gravel path. She beat them with her fists, but they wouldn't move.
My baby!
She pleaded to Erasmus.
Please! It's my baby!
"Don't be afraid," Erasmus answered. "You are loved."
No!
The little boy stumbled along the path. The wind threw clouds of black smoke and knocked him down. Genevieve screamed his name and choked on the air. He was gone now, or at least out of sight, shrouded by debris and thickening funnels of smoke. "Don't be afraid," Erasmus said. A new figure appeared next to Genevieve. He was dripping as if he'd just teleported from under the lake, which Genevieve could see in the distance behind him, the water glimmering hellish orange. The man turned his black, drenched face to Genevieve, and her despair widened, became delirium. She knew what he was going to say, and he said it. "You should have been watching him." Water trailed from his forehead and onto his lips as he spoke.
Paul!
She moaned.
No! Please!
"Don't be afraid," Erasmus cut in from above. Paul pulled her face into his and screamed.
"You should have been watching him!"
Genevieve actually felt her heart break, physically, and this little death awakened her. She didn't bolt upright or leap out of bed. She just lay still in her soaked sheets. Her pillowcases smelled like armpits. She took all this in, the putrid smell, the dull ceiling, the damp bed, and tried not to feel any of it. Her nightstand had a drawer, and in this drawer was a picture of Paul and him. Paul and him together. She thought about looking at it. The cafe was loud and too cold. Baristas yelled order numbers and chattered amongst themselves and giggled. Customers hunched over drinks or laptops at their little tables. Couples spoke in hushed, serious tones to each other while other friend groups laughed too loudly, making a point of being heard. Genevieve walked in and saw Paul sitting at a table. There was one thing that hadn't changed. Paul always getting everywhere first. He was punctual, and Genevieve was not. When they were together, he would have told her just how annoyed it made him, or, if they were in company, shot her a disapproving glare. But Genevieve knew that now, emotional distance would make him too polite for that. He hadn't noticed her yet. He looked down at his cup and rolled it between his hands, as if using it to warm them. She waved to him. He looked up and saw her and forced a smile. Genevieve hustled to his table and made to hug him. He half stood and wrapped one arm around the side of her.
So good to see you,
Genevieve said, squeezing him tightly with both arms. Yeah, Paul said as they separated. Yeah, definitely, you too. He sat back down and smiled again and went back to warming his hands over his cup. Genevieve rolled her purse off her shoulder and sat across from him.
Clearly they didn't get the memo that the weather is changing and they can turn the AC off,
she muttered. Paul chuckled in a disapproving way. Some corporate head makes that decision. Probably has the thing set for a certain date. He glanced around the place. Genevieve studied him. 10 years hadn't aged him at all, at least not visibly. His black beard was a little bushier, but evenly trimmed, and hadn't yet begun to gray. Same shaved head, same perfectly clear, dark skin. His glasses were gone, and Genevieve missed them. His sport jacket was black, and all his clothes were dark. When they were together, he'd had a white one, and that, together with the glasses, had given him the look of a scientist or doctor. He had known that and leaned into it, and Genevieve had loved his lack of self-consciousness, his good-humoredness. Dr. Paul, she had called him, sometimes suggestively, sometimes innocently. Now he was serious. He seemed to want to blend in.
So you've hung up the doctor's coat,
Genevieve ribbed. Yeah, he shrugged, grinning a little. Time for a change. He fingered the lid of his cup, poked at the bubbly things that indicated the type of drink underneath.
You look good, though.
Thanks, he said, glancing up at her. Not so bad yourself. They were quiet for a few minutes. Genevieve tried to concentrate on the murmur and bustle of the cafe, because the flutter in her stomach was becoming painful. She had hoped it was just initial awkwardness, nervousness about a reunion that would quickly vanish as she got swept up in it. But she could tell it was more than that now, and she could tell Paul was fighting down similar feelings because she knew him and his signs. His lips were pulled up into a kind of close-lipped half-smile, something he did in public when he didn't want to appear upset. His leg was pumping rapid fire under the table, and his fingers were constantly looking for something to fidget with. If it wasn't his lid, it was the cup itself, or one of the buttons on his coat, or a packet of sugar he pulled from the little rack on the edge of the table.
So,
Genevieve probed,
do I see on the social that you're tying the knot soon?
Paul drew a long breath, but he smiled again, and this one was at least partially real. It showed some of his bright, well-kept teeth. Yeah, looks that way. It's happening fast. Genevieve nodded.
You happy about it?
Paul's head bobbed thoughtfully. Yeah, I think so. I think I am. He thumbed his lid some more and popped it up off the cup at one side. Genevieve realized she hadn't seen him take a sip yet. And, he said. His nose twitched. He ground his teeth for a second and caught himself and stopped. She's, pregnant. He didn't look up.
Oh,
Genevieve said.
Awesome, amazing!
She looked around, worried she'd said it too loudly.
Wow, congratulations.
She swallowed.
How far along?
6 months, he mumbled, still staring at his cup. He thumbed the lid some more and it fell all the way off the cup and landed with a hollow, papery clack on the table.
That's so great.
Genevieve couldn't help it. A tear rolled out of her eye. She tried to catch it but missed. Even though he wasn't looking, Paul noticed. She forced herself to giggle.
Well, I didn't see that on the social.
Look, Paul said. I know that might be a hard thing to hear about, and I don't want to cause you any, He scratched his beard and let the words hang.
It's not hard to hear,
she said, wiping another tear. Paul raised an eyebrow. No? Genevieve sighed. She'd always hated this about him, this ability he had to get to the bottom of her feelings before she did.
Well,
she allowed a hint of aggravation into her tone.
If you insist on knowing, my exact thoughts were that I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that again. I couldn't risk it. But it doesn't mean I'm not happy for you.
Paul pursed his lips. I didn't say it did, and I didn't insist anything.
All right then.
Genevieve looked away. She watched a barista talking with her hands to a coworker. In her frenzied animation, she knocked a latte off the counter with her elbow. Genevieve could hear but not see the splatter. Jeannie, Paul said. I'm just moving on. I've got to. What am I supposed to do?
Don't,
she snapped.
Don't what? I see what you're implying and don't. Save it.
Paul spread his hands. I'm not implying anything.
Yes, you are, but you're too polite to come out and say it. You and your hinting. I see that hasn't changed. A decade goes by and you still communicate in hints. I could move on if I wanted to.
I know you could.
And you want to get on your high horse and tell me that I should, don't you? I can hear it right now. I can hear you thinking it.
She felt so angry that she wanted to flip the table. Oh my God, Paul groaned. Forget it. Let's just change the subject.
Great.
Genevieve sniffed and wiped her eyes.
How's accounting? You still do accounting?
Paul picked up his coffee and swiped some old crumbs off the table with his sleeve. Yes, I still do accounting.
Good.
All right, he said, setting his coffee back down. Why did you even ask to meet up today? Maybe we should just get to that. Genevieve bit her lip. She tried to hold on to rage. It was a kind of defense. She liked it better than her real feelings, but it was slipping fast.
I met someone,
she murmured. Paul leaned over the table a little to hear her better. What? You met someone? Genevieve nodded.
The other day.
Paul's palm went up. You met someone? Just someone? And you had to tell me?
He was weird,
she said.
He was so weird. Everything about him didn't make sense. I couldn't... But now I can't stop thinking about him. He told me something and I can't stop thinking about it.
Paul watched her with growing concern. Genevieve thought she even detected pity in his eyes. She wanted to be angry about that, but she was beyond anger now. Momentum had left it behind.
I can't explain it,
she continued.
I can't explain it without sounding like...
Who was this guy? Where'd you meet him? Work?
No, at the park. I go to the park a lot lately.
Oh, that's good, Paul said with genuine approval. She frowned.
Why is that good?
Well, it's good to get out. Do something. Walking is good.
That's not...
She took a breath.
Look, let's not get talking about what's good for me again. We're digressing.
Paul rolled his eyes. Sorry.
The point isn't that I was at the park. The point is this weird fucking guy I met at the park who scared the shit out of me.
What was he, like a creeper? What did he do? Follow you?
No, it wasn't...
She cleared her throat.
Nothing I tell you about this guy will make sense. So really, even he isn't the point.
Paul rubbed his face. Okay, I don't...
The point is,
Genevieve said,
he made me think about things and I wanted to talk to you.
About what? For the love of God! Genevieve bit her lip so hard it hurt. She paused for a long time. Jeannie, Paul said. About what? Genevieve spoke so softly she could barely hear herself.
Do you blame me?
Despite her low volume, Paul knew what she said. His face darkened and he looked away. A barista shouted a ticket number into the cafeteria in an enthusiastic and peppy way.
Paul,
Genevieve nudged. He still wouldn't look at her, and this gave Genevieve her answer. She knew him. She knew him better than she had ever known anybody. I don't want to talk about that, he said, still looking off toward the front door. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to go back there.
You do,
Genevieve said.
You do blame me. You're just too good a man to say so. And I don't blame you. I don't blame you for blaming me. It was my fault.
Paul's jaw clenched. His nostrils flared. Just stop, he said. Just don't.
I should have been watching him,
Genevieve gasped.
I hadn't closed the gate at the top of the stairs. I thought he'd be fine.
Jeannie, Paul hissed. Stop!
All I did was go to the bathroom,
she sobbed.
Not even a minute. I thought he'd be fine, but I should have been watching him.
Stop! Paul shouted. The other tables went quiet and looked over. Paul looked around, his own eyes getting misty. When the chatter of the cafe picked up again, he leaned over the table. We can't change it, he growled. There's no sense doing this to yourself. Now, I told you, I'm trying to move on. I have to. You need to stop this. He got up to leave. Genevieve grabbed his arm.
Just tell me.
He tried to gently pull away, but she held him.
Paul, please. I just need to hear it. Tell me you blame me. Just say it.
Let go of me. His voice cracked.
Paul, please.
Paul yanked his arm so hard that Genevieve almost fell out of her chair. She lost her grip on him and flapped her arms to keep her balance. By the time she righted herself, he was halfway out of the cafe. After the cafe, Genevieve drove to the lake. Erasmus, she decided, was all she had left. Life was crazy like that. She would go to the park and to the tree where she found him the first time. If he wasn't there, she'd wait for him. She'd stay into the night. But she had a feeling he'd be there. It wasn't long after noon. Warm. Saturday. A sky with only occasional wisps of white. Genevieve could see already that the place was swarming. Would he be there with so many people? The road took her up a hill and around a curve that brought the lake into view, the water so green and still it looked like a sheet of stained glass in the sun. She reached her usual stoplight and sat at the intersection and pondered. What was she doing? This was stupid. She'd never find the same guy in the same tree. With all those people there, they'd probably seen him and called security by now. He was probably banned from the park. And even if he wasn't, what was she doing? What did she expect to happen if she found him? She realized that she'd never thought about it. She didn't think this through. Shocker. When did she ever think anything through? She continued to berate herself as the light turned green. Fuck it, she thought. She stepped on the gas and decided to go home and get drunk. All she could remember from then on were flashes. The growl of a diesel pickup. The gunshot sound of crumpled metal. Gems of shattered glass slicing her face and catching in her hair. The smell of burned rubber and singed grass. An explosion of stars and lasers and screaming tinnitus as the uprooted pole of a fence bashed her skull. An instant of weightlessness and floating window shards. Her seatbelt catching her as gravity returned and tried to throw her up through the roof. Slumping over the steering wheel as the car filled with water and the world drifted from light to dark. There was no tunnel of light. There weren't any singing angels. But there was a park and, ironically, a lake. This one was not gated off. Crystal water lapped at a small shore of golden sand, the shore itself encircled by forest and teeming with the music of birds, frogs, chirping insects, wind and leaves. Genevieve sat on a bench in the middle of all this, looking out at the lake. She hadn't arrived here. There was no entrance that she could remember. She was just present, all at once, the way dreams begin somewhere in the middle. It was, she thought vaguely, the most peaceful place she'd ever been. The grass and trees and even the water and sand all seemed alive. The environment itself radiated joy, as if its existence was an act of celebration. But Genevieve was too dazed to enjoy it. Her sense of self was, somehow, diminished. She felt like she could dissolve into this place, into the calm bliss of it, and the place seemed to want her to. It encouraged surrender. It was love itself opening its arms. The sweetness of it all was terrifying. What would happen if she gave into this temptation? What would be left of her? She wasn't ready. There was a change in the air, and she felt a presence join her on the bench. She turned and saw that it was Erasmus, sitting with one arm propped on the bench back, smiling his hypnotic smile. His eyes undressed her soul. They were blue whirlpools, sucking in every thought and emotion she'd ever had in her life, so that she felt herself spinning to the bottom of them. She looked away and hugged herself, afraid that she might really disintegrate. She noticed then that her clothes were oddly formal. She wore a dress so silky and white that it glowed, as all colors in this place seemed to glow. It was like wearing the sun. She had never seen this dress before, never owned one like it. The flats on her feet, colored the same brilliant white, were also unfamiliar. "How you doing there, kiddo?" Erasmus said. Genevieve shivered. "What do you want?" Erasmus laughed, which calmed Genevieve somewhat. "Want? Why did you bring me here? Who says I brought you here?" She glanced at him, avoided his eyes. "You said you wanted to talk to me, and now I'm here with you, talking. What do you want?" "I don't want anything. I don't have wants." "Ugh," Genevieve groaned. Her frustration was actually a comfort. It made her feel earthly again. "Why are you so dense all the time? It's like talking to a riddle." Erasmus went through the motion of smoothing his blonde hair down, though it was so perfectly cropped that it didn't need any smoothing. "I just think that the questions with the most profound answers are the ones we ask ourselves. Why do you think you're here?" "Well," Genevieve thought back. She remembered snapshots, an accident, a crash. Her car had fallen into the lake. "Shit," she said. "It really happened? I'm dead?" Erasmus touched her shoulder. "For now, yes." She allowed his hand to rest there. The thought of him as a creepy weirdo was outdated now. It had never felt right anyway. It was a logical thought, one that made Earth sense. But Earth logic didn't apply here. His compassion was too radiant, too vividly real. She even felt it, as if it was hers. She watched the ripples in the lake, let the flawless turquoise blue of the water relax her. Overhead, a few ravens were circling. "What does that make you, then?" Genevieve asked. "Are you like my angel?" Erasmus laughed. "What a flattering word. I'm afraid it gives me too much credit." "So who are you, then?" "Who are you?" "Someone who doesn't like having my questions answered with other questions." Erasmus turned and folded his hands in his lap and gazed out at the water. "Have you ever thought about my question?" "Have I ever thought about who I am?" "That's what I asked." "I mean, yeah. Generally, at least, yeah." Oh, wonderful. What have you concluded?
Well,
Genevieve thought about it. A heron crept around the edge of the lake.
I'm Genevieve Winters. I work in HR for an electronics company.
Erasmus shook his head. Nope. Genevieve chuckled.
What do you mean, nope?
The heron jabbed its head in the water, and a fish came up splashing in its beak. It spread its huge wings and flew up into the trees with the fish still wiggling in its mouth. You just threw a bunch of labels at me, Erasmus said, still looking out at the water, grinning in a slight, peaceable way. Genevieve, HR, electronics company. Those are labels. Labels are not the things to which they refer. Who are you really? Underneath all your labels. I was a wife, she said quickly, feeling oddly defensive. Then she added more softly, I was a mother. These are still labels, Erasmus sang. Genevieve threw her hands in the air. I give up, man. I thought the afterlife was supposed to be all love and light and shit. I get here and you're grilling me. The afterlife is what you make it, Erasmus said. You're the one asking big questions. It just so happens that if you want to know who I am, you'll have to find out who you are. That's the only hint I'll give you. Genevieve shook her head, but she did feel thoughtful. Something like fireflies began to glitter at the edge of the forest, though they cycled through every color imaginable, including many Genevieve couldn't have perceived on Earth. Wow, she breathed. This place really is something. Erasmus agreed in silence. They sat for a moment together and watched. So what happens now? Genevieve wondered. Erasmus slapped his knees and stood up. Just the question I wanted to hear. Why don't you take a little stroll with me? He held out his hand. Out of more Earth habit, Genevieve hesitated, but realized in a second that this reaction made no sense. Lying was impossible in a place that was generated, it seemed, by emotion. Erasmus's emotional intentions were as clear to Genevieve as her own, even if the meaning of his verbal judo was unclear. They walked down a dirt path that anticipated their steps and drew itself in the grass in front of them. As they entered the forest, they could see hills rolling into existence miles ahead, sprouting trees like countless hairs. The leaves on nearer trees changed from green to autumn, creating a ripple effect that followed their pace. Flowers bloomed along the sides of the trail as it scribbled its way forward, and then died as they passed. This rhythm of birth and death was perfectly timed to their walk, with the petals reaching peaks of color and glory just as they stepped beside them. Genevieve was overcome with a feeling of awe that had no particular source. Awe was general here. It gained in intensity with every step they took, to the point where Genevieve began to worry that it would shatter her lingering sense of humanity. She decided to ask Erasmus if that was the goal. Was he taking her to be erased? Subsumed into some formless divinity? As she opened her mouth to ask, Erasmus stopped, and the living trail split into 3 separate pathways. One left, one right, and one straight ahead. New forests grew around every path, forming vernal tunnels. At the end of the left and right paths were swirling vortices of golden light. At the end of the path in front of them was complete blackness. Erasmus stood at the intersection of the trails and held his arms straight out at his sides and made a signpost of himself. Look left, he said, waving his left arm. Or look right. He waved his right arm. Why? Genevieve hugged herself again. He brought his palms together and made a gesture like prayer. You asked what happens next. These are your options. Genevieve looked down the left pathway first. As she stared into the light, it morphed and became a vision. She also became the vision, in a way she couldn't have explained. She lived the events she saw and felt all the emotions associated with them, but it happened in a timeless way. It could have been years as much as seconds spent enveloped in the scenes. What she saw was a little girl, brunette, hazel-eyed. The girl was happy and warm-hearted. She danced and sang. The girl's joy and good nature was contagious, and as the two grew and aged together, became more and more a part of Genevieve. There were always classes of some sort glowing on the girls' screens. Singing tutorials, piano videos, art techniques, streams of art history classes. When she wanted to learn to ice skate, Genevieve brought her to all her lessons and even tried to learn with her. And in their clumsy fumbling during the first lesson, she remembered what real laughter felt like. The girl grew up and went to school. Her gift of curiosity was so great that the most stressful part of it was deciding what to major in. She became a nurse in the end, and when Genevieve was too old to care for herself, the girl cared for her. Genevieve came out of the vision suddenly and fell backward. Erasmus caught her and held her.
Jesus Christ!
She gasped, wiping a coat of tears from her face. It's all right, Erasmus said. He rubbed her back and stroked her hair. Just take it easy.
What the hell was that?
She suspected the answer, had felt the answer, but she wanted Erasmus to confirm it. That, Erasmus said, is what will happen if you go back. She looked up at him.
I could go back?
His brilliant eyes glimmered even more brightly here than on Earth. Genevieve thought of blue stars. If you want, he said.
How is that possible?
Erasmus shrugged. They're trying to resuscitate you as we speak.
Shit, how long do I have to make this decision?
He smiled down at her and she was instantly calmed. Time isn't really a thing here. Just relax. Genevieve twisted out of his arms and looked down the opposite path.
Well?
She sniffed and took a breath.
What kind of emotional roller coaster is down that way?
Erasmus dipped his head in a somber way. Take a look and find out. She took one nervous step forward. His weird gesture wasn't encouraging. She rolled her shoulders a bit and allowed herself to be drawn into the light again. This time she saw her baby. She relived his birth, felt Paul holding her hand in the hospital. Alternating waves of joy and grief swept through her as she witnessed, somehow both objectively and subjectively, the 2 years they'd had together as a family. There were all the same milestones, birthdays and holidays, a trip they'd taken to Niagara Falls a few months before the accident. And then there was the accident. Genevieve watched her son at the top of the stairs, a toy airplane soaring in his hand. His eyes were on imaginary clouds. She screamed for him, but it was no use. She didn't have a voice that he could hear. In his flight, he drifted closer to the stairs. Genevieve tried not to watch, but she had no eyes to close. All that existed now was the vision. There was no accident. Genevieve saw herself run down the hall and snatch up her son. She picked him up and held him and yelled at him to be careful. He cried and she held him. The boy grew up. He and Paul and Genevieve were a family. They grayed and retired, and the boy had children of his own. They enjoyed several years as grandparents before their time on Earth was up. And when that time came, the boy, now a man, held their hands as they lay down. Genevieve came out of the vision sobbing. She collapsed in Erasmus's arms again, and he held her while she wept. When Genevieve calmed down, she looked up at Erasmus. They had fallen all the way to the ground so that her head and shoulders lay in his lap, he sitting cross-legged, holding her head against his chest.
Are you trying to tell me,
she said,
that I can have another chance with my son?
Erasmus gave one slow nod. If that's what you want.
I can just start over and live my whole life again and forget any of this ever happened, only I don't lose him? He'll never...
She trailed off. That is one of your choices. A heat of odd rage rolled in her.
Choice?
She erupted.
You want me to make a choice? I've got my unborn daughter in one hand, the son I lost in another, and you want me to throw one of them out? I'm supposed to just decide on this? What the fuck makes you think I can do that?
You're not supposed to. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to make this decision. He said this so gently and simply, and gazed down at her with such compassion that her fury melted. She didn't want it to melt. It seemed the only appropriate emotional response to the situation. But the man had an infuriating way of repelling infuriation. It was like shouting in an enormous room and not getting an echo. He was also, she couldn't deny, one of the most gorgeous people she had ever seen. Not in a sexual sense. It was more like looking at an artistic masterpiece. Beauty like that had a way of dispelling tension. Michelangelo couldn't touch this guy. People don't look at the statue of David and get angry, Genevieve thought. Well, she said, relaxing her tone a bit, how can I not? This is like a paradox. I can't make this decision, and I can't not make it. I mean, are you kidding? Do you see what I'm faced with here? Yes, Erasmus said lightly. But you're forgetting you have a third option. Genevieve sat up and looked around Erasmus and down the third path, the one dead ahead. There was a black hole at the end of it, a pit of total darkness. It wasn't inviting. What's down there? Erasmus stood and coaxed Genevieve to her feet. He put his arm around her and they stood, looking into the abyss. Down there is something totally new, he said. An absolutely fresh start. If you go that way, there will be no more Genevieve winters. All of your favorite and most dreaded things, everything you've remembered and forgotten, all of your love and hate and fear and desire, all of your opposition to the world and all of your cooperation with it, all of your relationships and connections with people and things, all of your beauty and darkness, everything about this individual, this personality you've adopted, it'll all fall away, like an old coat in the wind. Good God, Genevieve shivered. What would be left then? What would I be? Erasmus looked at her with a glint. Who are you now? Genevieve didn't answer. She stared into the emptiness, that cosmic nothing, and felt she was beginning to understand. Erasmus came around and kissed her once on the forehead, and then he was gone. He didn't fade or dissolve on the air. There was simply no trace of him, instantly. A red leaf danced over the intersection of the three pathways. Genevieve bent and caught it. She was alone.